Well, hello everybody. My name is Roger and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. So today I'm doing a review of a book entitled Snap by Belinda Bauer. So this book is on the Man Booker long list, so I thought I'd give it a go, especially since it created quite a bit of controversy, being, I believe, the first crime thriller to ever make the Man Booker finalist. So, as per usual with my reviews, I will first talk about the synopsis of the story, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then my final verdict. So first, the story. So picture it, 1998. It's a blisteringly hot summer day. Eileen Bright's car breaks down on the highway, and Eileen decides to leave the car and go in search of an emergency telephone and instructs her 3 children to stay in the car because it's safer there. So after waiting and waiting and waiting, the children finally leave the vehicle to go in search of their mother. Finally coming across the emergency phone, they notice their orange receiver dangling loosely from the phone box. And soon thereafter, a car stops and a policeman approaches the kids. But Eileen Bright never returns, and I believe it was 9 days later when her body was found off the road, stabbed to death, with an unusual-looking blood-stained knife discovered near the body, and the case was never solved. But things get even worse for the kids when their father, who's unable to bear his grief any longer, goes out for milk and never returns, thus abandoning his children. So, fast forward 3 years to 2001. The children are living alone, pretending that their father still lives at home so they don't get taken into the social services system. So the children end up misleading the neighbors into believing that Mr. Bright is often away for days at a time working. So having to fend for themselves, Jack, who's exceptionally resourceful, is taught the art of burglary and ends up being quite adept at breaking and entering, stealing food for his family's survival. So he's doing his best to provide for his siblings, but it's not an easy life for any of them. So Jack starts to think more and more about his mother's death, and he is filled with this rage and anger at the idea that his mother's murderer was never caught. All he wants is justice for his mom. Then one night, while burglarizing a house, he finds a clue, and Jack's life begins to change. So meanwhile, across town, heavily pregnant Catherine wakes up to hear a noise in her house. Her husband Adam is out of town on business, so she's alone and pretty scared at the moment. So she calls down the stairs, threatening and shouting at the burglar, who then subsequently flees. But when she returns to her bedroom, she finds a knife and a threatening note that says, "I could have killed you." Now, strangely enough, instead of calling the police, she hides the knife in her sock drawer or underwear drawer, and decides to do nothing about it. So we then get introduced to a third plot line in which the police have over 100 unsolved burglaries in their books at the hands of a burglar nicknamed Goldilocks, because the burglar comes in when the homeowners are away, and not only does he steal, but he sleeps in their beds, eats their foods, cooks meals in their kitchens, takes a bath, and basically makes himself at home. So we then learn how these 3 storylines are related, though it does take a while for these plot threads in the book to converge. But when they do, the tension really escalates as long-buried secrets come to life. So what I liked about the book. In my opinion, Jack's character really made this story. I mean, here we have a 14-year-old boy thrust into a parent role without the necessary resources that an adult typically has access to. So thus, he has to come up with creative ways to support his siblings. His emotions as he struggled with the burden of putting food on the table and protecting his sisters, all the while trying to deal with his anger and grief. It was heart-wrenching at times and made for quite an intense reading experience. I also really admired the way that even though he was only a child himself, stepped up to the plate and did whatever he had to do to survive, even though a lot of it was outside of the law. I enjoyed how the story was told from several different characters' perspectives, and it really worked well in this story. But what I found interesting, especially in a crime thriller, is how the author doesn't rely on twists and turns to keep the reader interested and to move the story forward. In fact, I figured out who the murderer was probably before I was halfway through the book, and figured, I must be wrong, there has to be a huge twist. But I wasn't wrong, and there really wasn't a huge, shocking twist. It then struck me later on that this story wasn't about figuring out who done it, but rather the actual mystery was about how Jack, along with the detectives, find a way to link the suspected killer to Eileen Bright's murder and pull up enough proof for an arrest and a conviction. Now, that's not to say that there weren't surprises, because there were a couple of surprising reveals along the way. There just were no major shockers or plot twists that we often see in this genre. Now, what especially struck me about this book was the vividness of place as well as the characters. I could feel the sweltering heat as the children walked along the highway in search of their mother. The author really had a knack for creating vibrant and evocative settings and realistic, passionate, and memorable characters that pretty much leapt off the page for me. So what I didn't like, there really wasn't too much that I can pinpoint that I disliked about this novel. My only niggle was that it did take a while for things to get going, but the payoff was definitely worth hanging in there for. Initially, I was disappointed in the lack of twists and turns, as I come to expect them in mysteries and crime thrillers. So on to my final verdict. Snap was a clever and engaging story that I ended up loving. It's a multi-layered story, meticulously plotted and filled with quirky original characters and a gripping plot. And at the center of it all is a family destroyed by the pain of one crushing, vicious act, thus depriving them of a wife and a mother. So this story drew me in immediately, and after I figured out that it wasn't really a whodunit type of story, I ended up relaxing and really enjoying the ride. This was a strong, character-driven tale about senseless loss, grief, violence, courage, heartbreak, and betrayal. But it was also about survival, kindness, and the love of family. And there was also the theme of the snap decisions that ran through the story, and how such instantaneously made choices and decisions can change the course of our entire lives in a moment. Additionally, the story painted a vivid portrait of how characters managed to cope even in the most nightmarish of situations. So though Snap was a slow burner and wasn't filled with one action-packed scene after another, it was because of the realistic and relatable characters that kept me turning the page, with tension building slowly and steadily throughout the story. Now, would I say that this is a prize-worthy story at the Man Booker level? I don't know. I wouldn't really think so. Though the story was engaging and well-structured and undoubtedly worthy of a read, I've read far more exciting and thrilling crime novels than this one. So it'll be interesting to see whether it'll make the shortlist or not. But all in all, I am glad that I read Snap. It was an enjoyable, satisfying read, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. So have you read Snap? If so, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. So I want to thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. And if you like this video, please click the like button and also subscribe if you haven't. That way you'll get notified whenever I release new videos. So that is it for this time. I will talk to you in the next video. Roger and out.